The sun poured down over the grand courtyard of the Sterling estate, where 12-year-old Lily Sterling, the only daughter of one of the city's most powerful millionaires, played quietly among the flower beds, her golden hair gleaming as the breeze danced through it, yet her eyes reflected a sadness that her father often failed to notice, for while Charles Sterling had built an empire of wealth and influence, he had often struggled to bridge the gap between his business-driven life and the tender heart of his little girl, who longed for something more than material possessions. On that particular afternoon, Lily had slipped away from the watchful eyes of her nannies and bodyguards, carrying with her a favorite book of poetry, determined to sit beneath the sprawling oak tree that stood just outside the gates of her father's property, near the park where ordinary people gathered, a world so different from her own, and it was there, beneath the shade of that oak, that she encountered a woman who looked as though life had given her more burdens than kindness, a woman whose clothes were tattered, whose face bore the marks of hardship, and yet whose eyes carried a light so rare and gentle it drew Lily in immediately. This woman sitting on the cold stone with nothing but a notebook and a piece of chalk, sketching words and numbers on the ground as though they were treasures, and Lily, curious as ever, stepped closer and asked softly, "What are you doing?" To which the woman smiled warmly, despite her weariness, and replied, "I'm teaching myself, little one, because even when the world takes everything from you, it cannot take knowledge if you are determined to learn." And that was the beginning of something extraordinary, for instead of being frightened or judgmental, Lily sat down beside her, showing her the book of poetry she carried, and soon the two were reading together, the homeless woman guiding her through meanings and metaphors with an eloquence that astonished Lily, for this was not a woman without intelligence but a woman who had once known much, and as the hours passed, Lily found herself laughing, questioning, and learning in ways no private tutor had ever inspired within her, until the sound of hurried footsteps broke the spell and Charles Sterling, dressed in his sharp-tailored suit, stormed through the park gates with a mixture of fear and anger in his eyes, his security team scrambling behind him, and when he saw his daughter seated next to a stranger dressed in rags, his voice thundered, "Lily, what on earth are you doing? Get away from her." But Lily, with a courage Charles had rarely seen in her, shook her head defiantly and said, "No, Daddy, she's teaching me, she's kind." And in that moment, Charles's gaze shifted from his daughter's pleading eyes to the homeless woman, who did not cower under his stare but instead rose to her feet with quiet dignity, saying, "Your daughter is safe, sir, I would never harm her," and something about the calm strength in her tone unsettled Charles, for it was not what he expected, yet before he could respond, Lily clutched his hand and begged, "Please, Daddy, don't be angry, she's special," and against his instincts, against the logic that ruled his businessman's mind, Charles found himself pausing, studying the woman more carefully, noticing the grace with which she carried her suffering, the quiet brilliance in her words, and though he ushered Lily back toward the estate that evening, his thoughts remained troubled, unable to shake the image of the mysterious woman beneath the oak, and that night, as he sat in his grand study surrounded by walls of leather-bound books, sipping his scotch, he wondered why a girl with everything at her disposal would find joy in a stranger with nothing, and why his heart, long encased in steel, had quickened when her eyes met his even for that brief moment. But what he didn't know was that fate had already woven their lives together in a tapestry neither of them could yet see, and the next morning, when Lily slipped out once more to sit beneath the oak tree, Charles followed quietly at a distance, determined to understand what it was about this homeless woman that captivated his child, and as he watched from behind the trees, he saw something remarkable unfold. The woman, despite her ragged appearance, spoke to Lily as though she were royalty, teaching her not just words but lessons about kindness, resilience, and courage, her voice carrying a rhythm that reminded him of the teachers he once admired in his own youth, before wealth had consumed him, and suddenly he realized his daughter was smiling more freely, her laughter ringing like music, and in that moment Charles felt something stir deep within him, a realization that perhaps money was not the only thing that could enrich his daughter's life, perhaps it was this woman, this stranger, who carried a treasure no amount of wealth could buy.